So welcome to the Distributed Data Show. I'm here with Chris Bradford. We're going to be talking through some of what he's been doing lately and just kind of hopefully learning something new. So welcome.
From DataStax, this is the Distributed Data Show.
Hi. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so you've been with DataStax for how long?
Almost 3 years, but I've been working with the company close to 5 now.
Okay, excellent. So Cassandra has been kind of a bread and butter piece of your life for quite some time.
Oh yeah, half a decade now, easily.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So lately, what has been kind of keeping you busy?
So there's a number of projects I'm involved in, but one of the things I've been working on most frequently has been this CICD use case for DSE and for databases in general, and how does that look inside of enterprise environments?
Okay, yeah. So is there anything different than kind of we've done in the past, or anything new in that area, or?
So what I usually see with customers, and I've worked directly with customers, huge clusters.
Because you used to be an SA, weren't you?
Yeah, I used to be a principal architect. Now I'm working for the
Yeah.
partner team. But what we found was people would deploy a version of the software, and then they wouldn't upgrade until they absolutely had to. So maybe they had a support ticket and an issue was fixed, but the cadence of doing upgrades was really slow. And
Right.
there's always like a dread associated with it, like, oh man, we have to do this upgrade, it's gonna take X amount of time. And what is the fallout of that gonna be, right?
Right, and all the risk involved with
Yeah.
trying to take machines down and bring them back up.
Yeah, are my queries still gonna be performant? Like, what is the impact of doing this change? Is it a minor version? Is it a major version?
Right.
And what does that mean to me and my applications?
Right, so then how does the new stuff kind of play into that?
So the whole idea with the CICD pipeline, so CICD is a methodology, if you
Okay.
will. And continuous integration is the whole idea that you have your teams are constantly integrating new code into their environment, right?
Right.
And so features go out, but they might be hidden behind feature flags, but that code is still out there. It is integrated, and you're not doing these big pushes all the time. You're doing incremental pushes. I
see.
wanted to start to apply that to operations. I'm like, okay, well, we're doing patch releases, right?
Right.
Why don't
that's a good
we,
fit.
like, how long does it take to do that? And why don't we do that more frequently?
Right.
I've got some customers that are on a 6-month cycle. They won't do upgrades for 6 months, even if it's a patch level release.
Wow.
And that's,
So like security updates being a big thing in today's
Yeah.
world, that's actually an issue.
it can be, but it's a risk aversion. And so one of the things that really helps with that is confidence. You want to be confident in your deployment that it's going to behave the way that you expect it to. And the ultimate end goal is to have a stable platform that is up to date for security reasons, for performance reasons, and after a certain amount of time for support reasons.
Right, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So basically what you're doing is you're kind of optimizing it for the customer then, giving them an easy path to upgrade, path to stay current.
Yeah, so we're not working on the piece of actually upgrading, doing their upgrades. We want to give them the confidence that when this upgrade occurs, they say, okay, we know how this is going to behave in our environment, on our servers, on our hardware. Let's go ahead and push this out because it is not super impactful and it fixes a bug or a security issue or what have you. And that's what CICD is, and that's incremental releases. Let's do an incremental release with DataStax Enterprise. And to do that, to build that confidence, you need a bunch of components, right? And this whole infrastructure and process, and that has been my focus. So
testing is probably a big piece of that.
Definitely. And some customers, and we even do it, you can manually test. I can spin up a cluster, right, and run some load tests against it and look at the performance. But when you're talking about like production deployments, you want a multi-node cluster, you might want a multi-DC cluster.
And you might want it to be different than what your actual architecture is normally to see if you can scale up, scale down, any other changes.
You want the hardware to be the same. So like running DSE on my laptop is not the same as running DSE on a server with hundreds of gigabytes of RAM, right? So really, I can do a test, but I want it to be as close as possible to their workloads, the customer's workloads, as well as the customer's hardware, their configuration, their setup. What settings do they use? Right. That whole 9 yards. And that is not trivial if you're doing it by hand, especially with a large number of servers, of resources. So what we've done with this approach is we've automated everything that can be automated. My whole goal, I was talking with the customer and I said, listen, if you do this, you can fire up a test on Friday, go home, not get called in on the weekend, not be doing any of this stuff over in the evening hours or anything.
Right.
And you're going to come in on Monday and there's going to be a report and you're going to know how it behaved and you're going to be able to get actionable insights. You shouldn't be spending your cycles provisioning servers, configuring them, figuring out if all the configuration is the same. That's not your job. Your job is to take the report, the output of this, and make a decision. Yes, we're going to upgrade right now, or no, we will upgrade after we test a configuration change, or see what this impact is going to be, and surface it up to the business too.
Absolutely.
So instead of just kind of throwing the patch out there and saying, okay, let's go, we have this new version, and hopefully, cross our fingers, it's going to fix. We've validated it, we've tested it on your hardware, and we know how it's going to behave inside of your environment.
Awesome.
Which is fantastic. So there's like a whole bunch of different components here, and CICD has, when you're talking from a development perspective, you're talking about source control, you're talking about automated testing, and in the case of CD, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, that might actually go out to an environment automatically.
Right.
So what I would love to do from a operations team perspective is let's take our configuration as code, right? Mm-hmm. Let's commit that to a repo. Let's automatically deploy that to a development environment or a testing environment. Let's automatically run a suite of tests.
Right. Without
any human interaction.
So we have those reports. We have everything we need to make informed decisions on the directions.
So
it all happens.
From a operator, I say, okay, I want to make this configuration change. I check it into the repository in a development branch. I push to my code repo. My CI system, in this case, I built a demo using Jenkins.
Okay.
Jenkins picks up that change and says, oh, hey, I need to provision this version of DSE, and I'm going to deploy this configuration, and then I'm going to run this known workload against it. And the cool thing about this is where it gets super powerful, is it's not just deployment. It's not just automatically running a test. That's cool. Yeah. The really awesome thing is when you start talking about integrating with systems like monitoring. So what we did, we have Jenkins spinning up a DSE cluster inside of a Kubernetes environment.
Okay.
And then as those resources come online, they're automatically added to our DSE metrics collector.
Oh.
And we have dashboards that show the cluster. And the nice thing about this is in Jenkins, you have the concept of a job or a pipeline and a build identifier. And I use that as the cluster ID. So when I go into the metrics interface, I have a drop-down list for the clusters, and I can see pipeline dash build ID. I know that these are the results exactly for it. And if I want to get really squirrely, I can look at 2 different runs and compare the results of each one on the same hardware there might be configuration changes that were being tested, but with the same configuration.
Right.
And it's an even keel, it's an even playing field. So I can look at that data and say, okay, look, we had a reduction in latencies and an increase in throughput. Send this out to production right now, please.
Right.
And the cool thing about these CI/CD pipelines is you might automatically deploy to dev or test, right? Some of these systems allow for you to have manual actions. So if I've run a test and I say, okay, everything looks good here, I can click a button and deploy that to production and have Ansible jobs kick off.
Wow.
Or if you're using Kubernetes, push the manifest out there.
So this is automated so much of the busy work around actually trying to do a deployment and just made it an automatic process.
Yes.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and I think operators, they can do configuration and deployment of resources and monitoring all that stuff, and they're great at their job.
Right.
But I think that they can make better use of their time to make important decisions.
It's a force multiplier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we spend the cycles doing this? Let it be automated. Why don't we have a regression suite? Like, why don't I have I have part of application development as I develop a suite of load tests, right? And so when we come time for a new major version of DSE to come out, let's run that full suite against it. Let's see what's happening. Let's get in on the EAP, right, the early access program, and see what's going to happen. How does it affect our data density? Can we change the number of nodes? All of these things. There's so many variables and variants. I don't want to say you can only change configuration files. I also want you to say, hey, I want to see how we behave with a 3-node cluster, with a 5-node cluster.
Is this platform, like, could you choose to run in different cloud vendors and things like that as well?
So that's a great question. So the initial demo that I had was with Jenkins, and I was running Kubernetes on AWS, but I wasn't using their hosted Kubernetes, which was just EC2 instances that were set up in a Kubernetes cluster.
Right.
Really, it can be on-prem. And so that's one of the customer I talked to about this. I said, listen, you're on-prem, right? Mm-hmm. And you're not running Kubernetes, but you do run Jenkins, and we can do this with Ansible, we can do this with Puppet. So the automated configuration, easy mode, we can do that. We have tooling for that. You're already using tooling for that. Let's just leverage it as part of these pipelines. Same thing with load testing. Same thing with the monitoring tools. It's all there. The pieces exist. The components exist.
Right, it's putting them all together.
Yeah, we needed some glue, right? And that's part of what this whole process was, is to develop that glue between these various systems. Cloud resources are kind of fun because then you can provision resources just for that test run and then spin them back down.
Right.
So that can be super useful if you are in a cloud environment, whether that's on-prem or public cloud, right? Being able to provision these resources, run the configuration against it, then spin up the test, and then spin it back down to 0 is super valuable. I talk to retail customers all the time, and they're talking about like testing for Black Friday, getting capacity for Black Friday.
Yeah.
Why don't we do something like this to say, how much capacity do you need?
Right, and then just show them.
Yeah, do you need 6 DCs with 40 nodes in each DC? Maybe. Maybe you only need 20 nodes in each DC. Maybe you don't need 6 DCs. I love having actual data to make those key business decisions.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about n number of nodes, you have infrastructure costs, and if you're looking at new applications and you want to purchase new hardware, like how many servers do I need? Well, let's figure out what that looks like.
And as an SA, that's a big problem you hit is, trying to answer those sizing questions. It's a huge part of your job. And if you can actually walk in with the hard data, set it on the table, and people can
Let's take your data model, right? Let's come up with a data model. Let's look at your current data. Let's look at your growth. Let's look at maintenance overhead, right?
Right.
And let's also plan for you to lose a data center.
Yeah.
And have all your traffic hit a single DC.
And now we can make an informed decision based on that. Yeah. That's really cool.
And that's pretty fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming out today. This has been absolutely fantastic. Really cool stuff. Much needed for a very long time. So
yeah, definitely.
So awesome. Well, this has been Chris Bradford. I'm Eric Zietlow, and you've been watching the Distributed Data Show.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.